Digital echoes, shadows in the code part 1. Emma had always been fascinated by vintage gadgets, especially those with a story. One autumn evening, after a long day at work, she decided to browse an obscure online marketplace known for its oddities and curios. Among the listings, one item caught her eye: an old, seemingly unremarkable smartphone described as the last relic of a forgotten world. The price was laughably low, almost as if the seller was eager to get rid of it. Intrigued, Emma made the purchase, not knowing that this would be the beginning of her descent into a nightmare. When the package arrived, it was wrapped in plain brown paper, no indication of the sender. The phone itself was an old model, one she barely recognized, with a cracked screen and a battery that looked like it had seen better days. Yet, there was something about it, an aura of melancholy and secrets, that compelled her to plug it in. To her surprise, the phone powered up with a soft chime that seemed out of place in her quiet apartment. The screen flickered, showing a wallpaper of a dark, empty street under the glow of a single street lamp. Emma scrolled through the contacts, finding none. But when she opened the gallery, a chill ran down her spine. There were photos, but not of landscapes or people. They were glimpses of shadows, eerie figures in corners, and one particularly disturbing image of a silhouette in a window that wasn't in her apartment or any apartment she knew. Feeling a mix of curiosity and unease, Emma decided to look into the phone's messages. The inbox was empty except for one thread. The name at the top was Simply, with no contact details listed. The messages were in reverse chronological order. The latest reading: I've been waiting for you. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She scrolled up, each message growing increasingly unsettling. Don't look behind you. Why do you keep looking? I see you too. Each message was dated back to years ago, but the last one was sent just hours before she received the phone. Emma was alone in her apartment, the silence now deafening. She felt a sudden cold breeze, the kind that makes you feel watched. Her eyes darted around her darkened room, the shadows seeming to shift in her peripheral vision. Compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, Emma typed a message, "Who are you?" and hit send. The phone vibrated in her hand, a new message appearing. Almost instantly, "You invited me in." The room's temperature dropped, Emma's breath now visible in the chilly air. She stood up, ready to throw the phone away, but as she did, all lights in her apartment flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. Her phone's screen was the only light source now, and on it, a new photo appeared: a shadowy figure standing right behind her in her own living room. Part 2. With her heart racing, Emma turned around, half expecting to see the figure from the photo. But there was nothing, just her furniture casting long shadows in the dim light of the phone. She was alone, or so she hoped. The cold persisted, and her breath formed little clouds in the air. She tried to rationalize the situation. Perhaps it was just a prank, or a very advanced, albeit twisted, form of technology she didn't understand. She decided to investigate further. Despite every instinct telling her to drop the phone and run, Emma opened the apps, finding nothing out of the ordinary, except for one labeled simply as Memories. With a trembling hand, she tapped on it. The app opened to a black screen, then slowly, images began to appear, like a slideshow of horror. Each picture was a moment from someone's life, but all were moments of fear, despair, or solitude. One image particularly caught her attention: a photo of a woman who looked disturbingly similar to her, standing in what appeared to be her living room, but the decor was slightly off, as if from another time. The woman in the photo was looking directly at the camera, her expression one of sheer terror. Emma felt a connection, an eerie recognition, as if she was looking at an alternate version of herself. The cold grew more intense, and she heard a whisper, so faint it could have been her imagination, but it was clear enough to send shivers down her spine. "You can't leave now." Emma's resolve began to waver. She tried to turn off the phone, but it wouldn't power down. The battery indicator was stuck at 100, an impossibility given how long it had been on. Suddenly, the phone rang, startling her back to reality. The caller ID was blank. With a shaking hand, she answered it. There was silence, then a voice, soft and unsettling, spoke. "We've always been here, waiting for someone like you to find us." Emma's blood ran cold. She wanted to hang up, but her hand wouldn't move. The voice continued, "Each picture you see is a moment we've captured, a memory we've kept. They're all part of our collection now, just like you will be." The connection dropped, but the message was clear. Emma was not just dealing with a haunted phone. She was part of something much larger, something that transcended the physical device. Desperate, Emma ran to her window, throwing it open. The cold air of the night flooded in, but it did little to dispel the chill inside her. She looked down at the street, empty save for the occasional car passing by. She thought about throwing the phone away, but hesitated, fearing what might happen if she did. Turning back to her apartment, she noticed something new on the phone's screen. A video was playing. It was her living room, but not as it was now. Furniture was different. The wallpaper was from another era, yet it was undeniably her space. In the video, the woman from the photo walked into view, looking around in fear. Then, she turned, looking directly at where Emma stood, almost as if she could see through time, and whispered, "Help me." Part 3. The video on the phone ended abruptly, leaving Emma in silence, her mind racing with questions and fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone, that the boundaries between past and present, between the living and whatever this was, were blurring right before her eyes. She decided to do something, anything, to break this cycle of terror. She searched the phone's settings for anything that could explain what was happening, but found nothing out of the ordinary. In desperation, she tried to uninstall the Memories app, but it wouldn't delete. Each attempt was met with a message: "This app cannot be removed. It is part of you now." Feeling trapped, Emma realized she needed help, someone who might understand or at least believe her. She grabbed her personal phone, ready to call a friend, when she noticed something chilling. Her personal phone had received a message from the haunted phone's number, despite being off and in another room when the phone was received. The message: "Simply read, don't." Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath quickening. Ignoring the warning, she dialed her friend's number, but before the call could connect, her phone's screen flickered, and then it shut down. No amount of button pressing would turn it back on. She was cut off from the outside world. In the eerie quiet, the haunted phone vibrated again. Opening it, she found another message: "No one can help you here." Emma's resolve started to crumble. The air grew colder, and the shadows in her room seemed to dance, morphing into shapes that weren't there before. She decided to confront whatever was happening head-on. She opened the Memories app once more, this time noticing a new feature: a folder labeled "Your Future." With a mix of dread and determination, she clicked on it. The images that appeared were not of the past, but of moments she hadn't lived. Yet, moments of her alone, in darkness, in fear, surrounded by those same shadowy figures. One image showed her in her bedroom, the shadows closing in, and another, even more chilling, depicted her standing at her window, looking out. But this time, the street below was empty save for a single dark figure looking up at her. The cold intensified, the whisper returned, now louder: "Your destiny is with us." Emma felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape this nightmare. But where could she go? The shadows in her room began to coalesce, forming into figures, vague yet terrifying, circling her. She tried to scream for help, but no sound came out. Her voice was taken, just like her control over her environment. The phone vibrated again, this time with a video call. With no choice left, she answered. The screen showed her own room, but it was filled with these shadowy entities, moving, watching. In the middle, she saw herself, or rather, her future self, looking back at her in horror. The screen went black, and then words appeared: "Join us." Part 4. The room was now pitch black, the only light emanating from the haunted phone. Emma felt the presence of these entities around her, a pressure in the air that made it hard to breathe. She knew she had to act, to break free from this oppressive darkness. In a moment of clarity, she remembered the old tales about spirits and technology, about how some entities could be bound to objects, but could also be banished through understanding. And courage. Gathering her courage, Emma decided to document everything. She quickly grabbed her laptop, opening the camera app to record. "If I'm going to be part of this nightmare, the world should know," she murmured to herself. She turned the camera towards the haunted phone, capturing the eerie light it emitted. She opened the phone's gallery again, this time with the intention to expose whatever was lurking within. As she scrolled through the photos, each one more disturbing than the last, she narrated her findings. "These aren't just images. They're like windows into a dark, forgotten place," she whispered into the camera. Suddenly, the phone vibrated, and a new message appeared. "You think documenting will save you?" Emma felt a chill, but continued. "I'm not alone in this. Someone out there will see this, will understand. She was determined to fight back with the only weapon she had left, the truth. As she continued to record, the shadows in her room began to move, not away from her, but towards her. They seemed to grow in number, a dark congregation gathering around her. The whispering returned, now a cacophony of voices. You belong to us now, they echoed. Emma felt a tug at her courage, but kept recording. I won't be silenced. I won't be claimed. She went back to the Memories app, noticing now there was a new album, The Watchers. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing photos of people from different eras, all with expressions of horror, all in places that looked disturbingly familiar to her own home. She narrated, "These aren't just hauntings. They're a collection, a gallery of fear." She felt a connection to these people, a shared dread. One photo stood out. It was her living room, but the furniture was from another time, and there, in the reflection of a mirror, was the same shadowy figure that had been in her photos. The phone vibrated again, a new message. You see now, don't you? You're part of our history. Emma realized she needed to do more than just record. She needed to act. She looked around her room, trying to find something, anything, to break this connection. She remembered an old folklore tale about breaking curses with salt, a symbol of purification. Quickly, she dashed to her kitchen, grabbing a container of salt. Returning to her room, she began to draw a circle around herself with the salt, all the while recording. If you're bound by this phone, then I'll bind you back, she declared. The shadows seemed to hesitate, the whispering growing desperate. You can't escape. But as she completed the circle, a barrier seemed to form, the cold less penetrating, the darkness less overwhelming. The phone in her hand vibrated violently, the screen flickering with images of the shadows trying to breach her protective circle. Emma continued to document, I'm fighting back, and I'm not alone. There's strength in knowing, in seeing. She felt a surge of hope, a belief that she could end this, not just for herself, but for all those trapped in this digital purgatory. Part 5. With the salt circle around her, Emma felt a temporary safety. But she knew this was just the beginning of her fight. The phone, still in her hand, now showed a live feed instead of static images. It was her own room, but the perspective was from the corner, where no camera could be. The shadows were visible, moving, trying to find a way through her protective barrier. She kept recording, narrating. This isn't just about me. It's about breaking this cycle for everyone bound by this curse. The feed on the phone changed, showing different rooms, different times, but always the same shadowy figures lurking, observing. Suddenly, the phone received a call, the caller ID blank. With a deep breath, Emma answered. What do you want from me? A voice, layered and distant, replied, to join us, to become part of the endless night. No, Emma retorted, I'll end this. She looked at her laptop, uploading the video to a cloud service, ensuring it would be accessible even if something happened to her or her equipment. The world will know, and this will end. The voice on the phone laughed, a sound that chilled her to the bone. Do you think you can stop what has been going on for centuries? But Emma was resolute. She began to research on her laptop, looking for any information, any ritual, any method to sever this connection, to free the souls trapped within. While searching, she found an old forum post about a similar experience, where someone had managed to dispel the entity by reciting a passage from an ancient text meant to calm restless spirits. With the phone still showing the unnerving feed, she searched her digital library, finding an obscure book on spiritual protection. She started reciting the passage, her voice gaining strength with each word. By the light of truth, by the power of will, I command you to depart, to leave this realm of the living. The room's temperature fluctuated wildly, the shadows on the screen recoiling, the phone vibrating as if in protest. The feed on the phone suddenly changed, showing a glimpse of light, a sign that her incantations were working. But the shadows fought back. The whispering turned to screams, the phone screen cracking under the pressure of the entities trying to manifest their rage. Emma knew she had to keep going, had to keep the faith. She repeated the incantation, louder, with more conviction. Return to your rest. Leave this place of light and life. The screen of the phone shattered completely, the light from her laptop illuminating her determined face. The room cleared, the oppressive darkness lifting, and for a moment, there was silence. But then, a soft, grateful whisper filled the room. Thank you. From all those she had unwittingly helped to free. Emma collapsed into her chair, exhausted but relieved. She looked at the now broken phone, knowing she had to dispose of it properly, to ensure no one else would suffer as she had. But first, she needed to rest, to gather her strength for what was to come next in dealing with this aftermath. Part 6. After resting, Emma knew her work wasn't done. The phone, though shattered, still held a malevolent energy. She decided to consult with someone who might know more about such phenomena, an old friend from college who had studied parapsychology. She emailed him the video she had recorded, along with a detailed account of what had happened. While waiting for his response, she wrapped the broken phone in several layers of cloth, feeling the residual chill even through the fabric. She knew she couldn't just throw it away. It needed a proper, respectful disposal. Her friend Mark replied quickly, suggesting they meet in person, as he believed this was beyond simple hauntings. He had heard of similar cases where technology became a conduit for the supernatural, but this one seemed particularly potent. They met at a local cafe, away from her home, where Mark brought a small, ornate box he said was designed to contain cursed items. This was crafted by someone who knew the old ways, he explained. It might not solve everything, but it will help contain whatever is left in that phone. They discussed the possibility of performing a ritual to cleanse her home and the phone. Mark suggested they do this during the next full moon, a time when the veil between worlds was supposedly thinner, enhancing the power of spiritual rites. As they planned, Emma felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. She knew that even with Mark's help, this was far from over. They agreed to meet at her apartment as the full moon rose, armed with sage, salt, and the incantations Mark had prepared. Back at her apartment, Emma prepared for the night, setting up candles, ensuring all windows were open for the cleansing energy to flow through. As the moon began to rise, she felt the air change, a subtle shift that could either be the start of her freedom or the beginning of another nightmare. Mark arrived, carrying the box with reverence. Together, they set up the ritual space, drawing symbols of protection around the room, placing the box phone at the center. As they began the chant, the atmosphere thickened with energy, the candles flickering wildly despite no breeze. The phone, even within its containment, seemed to pulse, resisting the cleansing. Shadows danced on the walls, less menacing now, but still present, a testament to the power of whatever had been bound to the device. They continued the ritual, focusing on each word, each gesture, feeling the energy of the moon aiding their efforts. Slowly, the room warmed, the shadows dissipating, and a sense of peace began to settle. Just as they finished the last incantation, a soft glow enveloped the box, and then silence. The oppressive energy was gone, the air light once again. Mark sealed the box with a final prayer, ensuring whatever was left inside would no longer harm anyone. They decided to bury the box at a crossroads, a traditional way to deal with malevolent spirits, ensuring they would be confused and unable to return to any one place. As they walked to the spot, Emma felt a weight lift off her, not just from the immediate threat, but from the shared burden of those souls she had unknowingly helped. With the phone buried, they returned to her apartment, now feeling like a sanctuary rather than a prison. Emma knew life would never be the same, but she also knew she had faced and overcome something few would believe. She decided to keep documenting her experiences, hoping to warn others about the dangers lurking in the shadows of technology. Part 7. With the immediate threat neutralized, Emma and Mark felt a cautious relief. However, the experience had changed Emma. She was more aware of the unseen, the energies that intertwined with the physical world. She began to research more about psychic protection, folklore, and the intersection of technology with the supernatural. One evening, while browsing through forums dedicated to paranormal experiences, she stumbled upon a thread where someone described an incident eerily similar to hers, a phone bringing terror into their life. The poster had managed to escape, but left a warning. These things don't just go away, they adapt. This made Emma realize that the fight might not be over. She contacted the person who went by the username Last Signal, and they shared stories, theories, and protective measures. Together, they formed a small group online, connecting with others who had experienced similar hauntings through technology. They named their group the Light Keepers, dedicated to both sharing knowledge and watching for signs of recurrences. Emma took on a leadership role, organizing virtual meetings where members could share new findings or seek help if they felt threatened again. Meanwhile, Emma learned to live with a new sense of vigilance. She installed protective symbols around her home, kept salt by each door and window, and even started learning about digital security to ensure no malevolent entities could use her devices again. One day, she received an email from someone claiming to have been a victim of the same cursed phone, but this one was still active. The sender, Echo and the Dark, was desperate. Their story was chillingly familiar, but with one new element: the phone was now sending messages from numbers that belonged to known deceased individuals. Realizing the danger was escalating, Emma called an emergency meeting of the Lightkeepers. They discussed the possibility of these entities evolving, learning from each encounter, and becoming more adept at using technology. They agreed to help Echo and the Dark, but this time, they needed to be more proactive, perhaps even setting a trap to capture or banish the spirit permanently. Emma proposed using a controlled environment, filled with protective wards, where they could lure the entity into a situation where it could be contained or exorcised. Mark agreed to help, bringing his knowledge of ritual magic, and together with a few others from the group, they planned an operation. They set up the space in an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, away from any civilians, ensuring it was warded against supernatural interference. They invited Echo and the Dark to bring the phone there, under the guise of a place where they could finally find peace. As the night of the operation approached, tension mounted. Would this be the end of this digital curse? Or would it be another chapter in an ongoing saga? Emma felt the weight of responsibility, not just for Echo and the Dark, but for all those who might come into contact with these entities in the future. When Echo and the Dark arrived, the phone was placed in the center of the ritual space, surrounded by candles, salt, and mirrors to reflect and confuse the spirit. As they began the ritual, the phone vibrated violently, messages appearing, threats and pleas mixed into one. The air grew cold, the shadows danced, and the battle for control began. Part 8. The atmosphere in the warehouse was thick with anticipation as the ritual commenced. The phone, placed in the center of a pentagram drawn in salt, vibrated with an intensity that seemed to shake the very air around it. Emma, Mark, and the members of the Lightkeepers stood in a circle, reciting incantations meant to bind and expel the malevolent force within the device. As they chanted, images flickered on the phone's screen, faces of people long gone, messages from beyond, and glimpses of dark, unlit places. The shadows in the room grew deeper, more defined, moving as if they had a will of their own. Echo and the Dark, visibly shaken, watched as their nightmare took on a physical form. The phone's screen shattered further, but instead of stopping, the messages continued to appear in the air, written in light, as if the spirit had transcended the physical device. Emma, feeling the surge of energy from the group, focused her intent. "We bind you, we release you, back to where you belong," she shouted over the cacophony of spectral voices. The air around the phone shimmered, the cold reaching a peak. Then suddenly, a wave of warmth spread outward from the circle. The shadows receded, the messages in the air faded, and the phone went still, its screen now blank, the vibrations ceasing. There was a moment of absolute silence, then a sigh, as if the very room exhaled in relief. Mark checked the phone, now feeling no malevolent energy emanating from it. "I think we've done it," he said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. They carefully packed the phone into another containment box, this one reinforced with more powerful symbols and enchantments, ensuring no residual energy could escape. The group discussed what to do next. After some debate, they decided to study the phone further, perhaps learning more about how these entities operated through technology, but always under strict control and in a secure environment. They agreed to keep a close watch on any similar incidents, ready to respond with their newfound knowledge and unity. Echo and the Dark, now free from the curse, thanked everyone, their voice trembling with relief. "I thought I was alone in this," they said, "but now, I see, we're stronger together." They joined the Lightkeepers, adding their experience to the collective effort. Emma felt a profound change within herself. She had faced the unknown, harnessed the power of knowledge, and turned fear into action. She knew that while this battle might be over, the war against the unseen was ongoing. She committed to documenting everything, sharing their findings, and preparing for whatever might come next. Back in her now familiar yet forever changed apartment, Emma sat down to write. She started a blog, detailing their experiences, the rituals, the technology, and the community they had built. It wasn't just about warning others. It was about creating a beacon of light in the digital darkness, a place where the lost could find their way back to safety. As she published her first post, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that this was just the beginning of her journey, not the end. The Light Keepers continued to grow, their vigilance a silent promise to keep the shadows at bay, one haunted gadget at a time. Part 9. After the successful ritual, Emma felt a sense of calm return to her life, but it was a deceptive peace. The Light Keepers continued their vigilance, but the digital world was vast, and threats lurked in its shadows. One night, as she was about to close her laptop, a notification popped up. It was from an app she didn't remember installing named Echoes. The icon was a simple black square, unassuming yet chilling, curiosity mixed with dread. She opened it. The app was empty, save for one message: "We're not done with you." Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly closed the app, but it wouldn't stay closed, reopening itself with a new message: "You can't hide from us." Emma knew she needed to involve the Light Keepers. She called an urgent meeting online, sharing screenshots of the app. The consensus was clear. This was not an isolated incident. The entity was adapting, using new vectors to reach out. Mark suggested they trace the app's origin, using his skills in digital forensics. As they delved deeper, they discovered that the app wasn't just installed on Emma's device. It was appearing on the devices of several members of the Light Keepers, each with personalized messages that played on their deepest fears. With each attempt to delete the app, it would reappear, sometimes with new, more sinister messages. "Your past will catch up," one read, followed by a photo of a member's old home, now abandoned and eerily lit by a single street lamp. "You'll never be safe," said another, accompanied by an image of a shadowy figure in a familiar place. The group decided to meet physically again, this time at Mark's place, which was already set up with protective wards. As they gathered, the air was thick with tension, each member recounting their personal encounters with the app. The meeting turned into a brainstorming session, where they decided to use technology against the entity. They set up a network of devices, all with the Echoes app, to try and lure out whatever was behind it into a digital trap. They worked through the night, coding and casting, blending tech with ancient protections. As dawn approached, their trap was ready. A digital circle formed by code and runic symbols was meant to contain any malevolent energy attempting to breach their defenses. They activated the app on one of the devices within the circle, and immediately, the room's temperature dropped. The screen showed not just messages, but now videos, scenes of places from their past, each filled with lurking shadows. Suddenly, every device in the room started to vibrate, the screens showing the same scene: a dark room, presumably where the entity was strongest. Voices whispered from the speakers, a cacophony of threats and pleas: "Release us, join us, your hour's now." Emma, with Mark by her side, initiated the final command to close the digital circle. The screens flickered, the room's lights dimmed, and then everything went black. For a moment, silence reigned, then a scream, digital and inhuman, echoed through the room before being abruptly cut off. The lights returned, the devices silent. They checked each one, finding the app gone, replaced by a single message on every screen: "You have won this round, but we are endless." The group knew this was not the end. They had managed to buy themselves time, but the entity had evolved, becoming part of the digital ether. They decided to increase their efforts, not just to protect themselves, but to create a database of these digital hauntings, to warn and educate others. Emma felt the weight of their mission more than ever. She proposed expanding the Light Keepers, reaching out to tech experts, spiritualists, and anyone with knowledge of the occult. They needed to be ready for the next wave, for whatever form this digital curse might take next. As they left Mark's place, the sun was up, casting light where shadows had danced just hours before. Emma looked at her phone, now free from the Echoes app, yet she knew it was just a matter of time before the next challenge rose. The battle between light and shadow, technology and the supernatural, was far from over. Part 10. In the weeks that followed, Emma dove deep into her research, her days filled with coding, studying ancient texts, and coordinating with the Light Keepers. They expanded their ranks, adding tech wizards, folklore enthusiasts, and cybersecurity experts to their cause. Their goal was clear: to stay one step ahead of whatever digital entity was haunting them. One night, while working late, Emma received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line was simply "Help." Opening it, She found a video attachment with no message. With caution, she played it. The video was grainy, showing a dark room. The camera focused on an old computer screen. Suddenly, the screen on the video flickered to life, showing the same Echoes app icon she had encountered. The video then shifted to a person, their face obscured by shadows, whispering in terror, "It's back, it's in my device. It knows where I live." The video abruptly cut off. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. This was no longer just about her group, but had escalated to affecting others outside their circle. She immediately called an emergency meeting of the Lightkeepers, sharing the video. The group decided to trace the sender's IP, hoping to locate and help this person before it was too late. They discovered the sender was located in a remote town, far from any urban center. A small team, including Emma, Mark, and a new member, named Clara, who had expertise in digital forensics, set off to find this individual. As they traveled, the sense of urgency grew. The closer they got, the more their devices began to act strangely. Random shutdowns, messages appearing and disappearing, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Upon arriving at the town, they found the address from the email, an old, dilapidated house on the outskirts. Inside, they found the sender, a young man named Tom, in a state of panic. His room was littered with electronic devices, all showing the Echoes app, each with its own set of haunting messages and images. Tom explained how the app had appeared on all his devices simultaneously, showing him places from his past where he experienced trauma, suggesting the entity was not just malicious, but personal. Feeding off his fears, with Tom's permission, they set up their digital containment protocol around his home, using a combination of tech and spiritual safeguards. As night fell, they activated their trap, hoping to capture or at least understand the entity better. The room grew cold, the devices vibrated, and all screens turned to static before showing a live feed of the room they were in, but from angles that were impossible from behind walls, above ceilings. The whispering started again, more aggressive. "You think you can contain us? We are the void between your bytes, the darkness in your digits." The group chanted protective spells while Clara worked on the digital side, trying to isolate the app's code to understand its origin. As they worked, the screens flashed with images of all their faces, distorted, in places they had never been, suggesting a deep intrusion into their personal lives. Then, a breakthrough. Clara managed to isolate a piece of code that seemed to be the core of the entity's digital manifestation. They initiated a sequence to delete this code, to sever the connection. The room shook, the lights flickered wildly, and for a moment, it seemed like they would be overwhelmed. But then, silence. The screens cleared, the cold receded, and the app vanished from all devices. Tom, visibly relieved, thanked them, his fear replaced by a cautious optimism. Back at their base, they analyzed the code Clara had saved. It was unlike any malware they had seen. It seemed to have a will of its own, adapting and learning. Emma knew they had won a battle, but the war was ongoing. They needed to keep evolving their defenses, keep educating, and stay vigilant. As they prepared for the next encounter, Emma felt a mix of dread and determination. The digital world was their battlefield now, and the stakes had never been higher. Part 11. After the incident with Tom, the Lightkeepers knew they had to expand their reach. They began creating educational content, warning about the dangers of digital hauntings, but the shadow of the Echoes app lingered in their minds. Emma, now seen as a leader among them, felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. One evening, while streaming one of their educational sessions, their broadcast was suddenly interrupted. The screen went black, then flickered back to life, showing a distorted image of their own room, but with a figure in the background that none of them remembered being there during the recording. The chat went wild, with viewers reporting seeing the same figure, some claiming it looked like someone they knew, long deceased or missing. Before they could react, a message scrolled across the screen. "You taught others, now we teach you." The stream ended abruptly, and every device in the room, not just those connected to the stream, vibrated with the same chilling message. Emma felt her pulse quicken. This was a direct challenge, an escalation. They quickly regrouped, discussing how to respond. Clara suggested they counter with a digital countermeasure, a lighthouse program designed to illuminate and expose any dark entities within a network. Mark, with his knowledge of spiritual practices, proposed they incorporate digital sigils into the code, blending the ancient with the modern to protect and purify. They worked through the night. The atmosphere grew tense. Every now and then, their devices would glitch, showing fleeting images of dark places, or whispers would sound through speakers, "You can't hide from us." But with each incident, their resolve only strengthened. By dawn, they had their lighthouse program ready. They uploaded it to a secure server, broadcasting its protective influence across the internet. They hoped it would act like a digital beacon, repelling the malevolent forces while guiding those in need to safety. The first test came sooner than expected. Reports started flooding in from around the globe about devices behaving erratically, showing the Echo's app or similar anomalies. The Lightkeepers decided to investigate one case personally, a young programmer named Sarah, who claimed her computer was sending her messages from her deceased sister. Upon arriving at Sarah's apartment, they were met with an eerie sight. Her screens were filled with old home videos, but the figures in them moved in ways that were not human, their eyes following Sarah around the room. The air was thick, cold, and smelled of something ancient and forgotten. Using the Lighthouse program, they began to scan Sarah's network. The program illuminated the dark code, showing how deeply embedded the entity was within her system. They saw digital symbols, not unlike those they had used in their protections, but twisted, corrupted. As they worked, the room darkened, despite it being midday. Shadows seemed to stretch from the corners, reaching towards them. Sarah's computer screen suddenly showed a live feed of the room, but from an angle above, as if looking down on them. A voice, not quite human, spoke through the speakers. "You think your light can banish us? We are the absence of light, the void where truth hides." Emma, with a firm voice, initiated the cleansing protocol of the lighthouse. The room filled with a soft glow from the screens, the digital sigils shining brightly, countering the darkness. The shadows retreated, the cold dissipated, and the feed on the screen returned to normal. The entity was pushed back, but not vanquished. It left a final message. "This is not the end," scrawled across all screens before disappearing. They had managed to protect Sarah, but at what cost? The entity was learning, adapting to their tactics. Back at their headquarters, the Lightkeepers analyzed the encounter. They realized they were dealing with something that could not only manipulate technology, but also feed off human emotion, particularly fear and sorrow. They needed to evolve their approach, perhaps even finding a way to communicate, to understand these entities rather than just fight them. Emma proposed they start a digital archive, a place where they could gather all known instances of these hauntings, patterns, and perhaps find a way to negotiate peace or at least coexistence. The task was daunting, but necessary. As they planned their next steps, each member felt the eyes of the unseen upon them. The battle was far from over, and the digital realm had become a new frontier for the supernatural. They were pioneers in this dark new world, with the light of knowledge as their only shield against the encroaching darkness. Part 12. The creation of the digital archive was a monumental task. The Lightkeepers worked tirelessly, compiling data, testimonies, and digital footprints of these paranormal events. Emma, feeling the strain of leadership, knew they needed to reach out beyond their group, forming alliances with others who might have encountered similar phenomena. One night, after a particularly exhaustive session of data entry, Emma received an anonymous message through a secure channel they had set up for tips. The message was cryptic, simply stating, "Look into the mirror." Initially dismissing it as another scare tactic, she was about to ignore it when her screen glitched, showing her own reflection, but with something dark moving behind her. Shaken, she called Mark and Clara to her side. Together, they decided to investigate this new lead. They set up mirrors around their workspace, each one facing a different device, hoping to catch any anomaly in the reflection. As they watched, one mirror began to cloud over, the reflection distorting, showing not just their room, but a place none of them recognized, a dark, endless corridor. The digital devices around them started to react, showing the same corridor, but from different perspectives, as if they were being pulled into this place. A voice, cold and clear, came from nowhere. "You sought to understand us, so we show you our world." They were witnessing a digital gateway, a bridge between their reality and something else. Mark suggested they document this, capturing every detail. They began recording, narrating their findings, hoping to preserve evidence of this encounter. As they watched, figures appeared in the corridor, shadows with human forms, but no faces. They moved towards the mirrors, as if trying to cross into their world. Emma felt a chill, not just from fear, but from a realization of how thin the veil between the digital and the paranormal could be. Suddenly, the screens showed their own reflections again, but now, these shadow figures stood behind them, not in the room, but in the reflection. The voice spoke again. "You see us now. We are not just of your world or ours. We are the connection." In a moment of intuition, Emma realized they might be dealing with entities born from collective human fears, manifesting through technology. She suggested they try communication, not confrontation. They began to speak, asking questions, offering peace, acknowledging the existence of these beings. The shadows paused. The air in the room seemed to lighten slightly. Then, a response came, not in words, but in images on the screen, scenes of loneliness, despair, but also moments of human connection, love, and understanding. It was as if the entities were showing them their purpose, or perhaps their origin. Mark proposed they create a digital sanctuary within their archive, a place where these entities could exist without harming or being harmed, a digital middle ground. Clara began coding the space, using the Lighthouse program as a base, adapting it to be not just protective, but welcoming. As they worked, the shadows in the mirrors receded, the cold lessened, and the atmosphere in the room changed from one of dread to one of cautious hope. They were not expelling these entities, but understanding them, creating a new paradigm for interaction. The digital sanctuary was completed, a safe space where the entities could manifest without causing fear. They named it the Nexus. When they activated it, the mirrors cleared, the screens showed calm, and a sense of peace settled over the room. The entities did not leave a message this time, but Emma felt a silent acknowledgement, a truce. They had managed to turn a haunting into a dialogue, a potential for coexistence in the digital realm. As the night ended, the Light Keepers knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. They had to continue their work, expand the Nexus, educate others, and perhaps in time, bridge the gap between the living and the echoes of the digital beyond. The fight against fear had transformed into a journey of understanding, one that would require all their knowledge and courage.